Hello, welcome to a new Max Chroma tutorial video. In this video, I'm going to be showing a little bit of the Max Chroma Master Colorizer Adobe Photoshop action set, but I'm going to specifically show the limited action set version, which is free, available on my payhip.com/maxchroma website. So you can click this product, and you could go to download now, enter your email address, and it could be any address, really doesn't have to be a real email address. You'll be able to download the actions right there. It also comes with some Photoshop files that I'll get into in another video, which are smart object based rather than action based. We'll talk about that stuff in a different video. I'm going to be using a test image example here. This is off of Pixabay, so you can use these images however you want to. If I were to go ahead and download this image, I'll put it right on the desktop here. And this guy on Pixabay has lots of cool car images, so I might actually look at some other ones in this video as well, and just talk a little bit about how I use the actions to extract an image. Let me go ahead and put that on the desktop into different layers so we can work with these images using that action set. And like I said, that's free. So I want people to kind of see how this Colorizer stuff works and be able to play around with it and not just have to purchase the actions. The ones that you would be paying for have a lot more expanded stuff to them. These have 6 hues or 12 hues and midtones plus the tint, shade, and tones. So if you have those action files right here, it's the Max Chroma HCWBTSGM Colorizer, and I've got Photoshop already opened. You can see I don't have any actions loaded in the actions panel right now. To install that, I'll just double click it and it'll load into the action panel. If I look at this in button mode, you can see the set broken down into the tonal division colorizers. These split it into all those various layers. Then you could actually go through and run the smart detectors after running these actions, and it would go through and find any layers that don't have anything in them and eliminate those based on these smart detect threshold and pixel cluster diameter conditional actions. Or you can just run the combined smart colorizers, and that's basically like this action and that action combined into one. I'm going to go ahead and load the image. Now the reason I'm starting with this test image is I showed in some previous videos how I would work with this and possibly just use the index mode to extract custom colors from it and actually select those points. But in some images, these points are the colors in the image are pretty close to the way I've divided these things up. And so if you follow some of my other videos, it shows the color model at which these are divided by. So it's like primary hues and then the chroma, tint, shade, and tone, plus various gray levels. Looking at the conditional actions, the smart detect threshold, I have it preset to something that works for most images. If you don't want to use that, you just wouldn't run the smart combined actions or the smart detector, you just run the colorizer. I like to go right in and use the smart colorizer actions and see what I get with certain images. The pixel cluster diameter detection is really if there is just a little bit of noise in the image, just a few pixels of a certain color, and they're considered noise. Like this would actually probably not detect this blue around the logo right there. But I'm really just looking at the primary areas of color in the image and I want to adjust them or work with them. So I'm going to leave those conditional actions default. Go back to button mode and I'll show you what we get with just running, let's say, the 12 hues times 4 tones action. And I'm going to look at my layers panel and just have some of that visible right there. Might even make those a little bit bigger for the video here. So just clicking the smart colorizer, 12 hues times 4 tones, it'll actually divide the image up into 12 divisions of hue around 360-degree circle. So that would be red, orange, yellow, lime green, and then green. I've got some color wheels that show how that works. And the 4 tones, that means it's the primary hue itself, the chromatic part of the hue, the tint, the shade, and the midtone. Now, based on the image size, the resolution, things like your computer processing power, your graphics card, and whether you're an 8-bit or 16-bit, I've changed a lot of these actions now. It doesn't have to have a separate file for 8-bit or 16-bit. It's really based on what your file is originally set to. These go ahead and they run through dividing everything up based on that color model, and then it produces layers that have color fill layers on them, which you can quickly go in and adjust. Now, why do I go and have all of these actions? Like, what is all this stuff for within Photoshop? Can't you adjust a lot of things in Photoshop that have to do with colors and tints and shades and tones? And you really can't do it at this level. And it's really not as easy as what you get from this action running all the way through. It's not as accurate the way the colors blend to each other. There really are no tools out there to do this kind of stuff. That's why it interests me so much. That's why I've spent so much research and development creating these things. Is it's really fun. It's an exploration for me of that HWB color model, expanding upon that color model into tints and shades and tones and grays, going even further into divisions. And this is basically done with the Colorizer part. Now it's running the smart detector. What it does is it actually duplicates the Colorizer image into another document. So if your threshold is set to a certain amount and it eliminates too many of the layers, it really doesn't eliminate them. It bounces them down to this bottom layer and merges it in. You can see it basically deleting all these layers, or it kind of grabs the layer group, moves it down to the bottom and merges it out. And you can see right there, I've got a 12 hue orange shade, a 12 hue orange midtone, a 12 hue orange tint. These are the colors, a little bit of chroma also. See that kind of past the threshold level. And a red shade. So those are the things that pass the threshold level, and it keeps them in. Once it's done, you can see it's recreated the original image by blending all those together. These are a whole bunch of layer groups, but to make it easier, all you have to do is go up here, go to Mode, Filter by Screen, and you can see right there I've got just these elements, and I can change those colors around however I want to. Okay, and if I look at the labels, you can see they're basically the black, dark gray, medium gray, light gray, and white. We have red shade, orange hue color, tint shade, and midtones, and a little bit of yellow tint. Basically on the graphic side of things, to do color grading or recolorizing, retouching, all you have to do is just double click on one of these layers and I can start to change that any way I want to. So there really is nothing else out there that I've found that does something similar to this as easily or as accurately. And that's kind of why I've created it all. I think it's fun to get into the colors. There are certain uses that people have. A lot of work that I did for many years, and why I tried to investigate this stuff and figure out better ways to do it, was for things like color separation for screen printing. But there's so many other uses to it that's why I've put it all out in this way. So you can go ahead and really adjust the colors, change them to whatever you want. I like the color picker for doing that, because I feel that all you have to do is open it and you can start lightening it or darkening it, moving it to less saturated, whiter, more black, switch the hues to whatever you want, and it honestly just blends with the other colors in the image. But let's go ahead and look at those and see what is in there. So let's take it off of the filtering, open up this group, and first there's a grayscales group. So I can take all of the grayscale out, and this is just the red shade. That's kind of what makes up some of that redness in there of the original. And I've got the original layer on top as well, so I can always look at that comparatively. Got the red shade, we've got the orange hue. Like I said, that's kind of mixed in, gives a little bit of that, the more chromatic element to it. And you could still go into any of these and put like a levels on there and sort of increase the amount that it is, rather than just changing the color that it is. but we won't get into too much of that in this video. Here's the orange tint, the orange shade, orange midtone. You can see how there's a little bit of chroma in there. And the yellow tint is mostly up in these areas here. Any of these layers you can look at by themselves. Let's say I were to just look at this red shade group. I can right click here, show hide all other layers, probably do it again because the original was on, and then just look at that by itself. So you can see it's essentially a grayscale layer with the colorizer on top of it. It's a color fill set to screen, and that colorizes that. Let's go ahead and look at the orange tint. So I can turn off that color fill, and you can see this is what people would call a positive or a color separation. Can look at the shade, right? So if you were to be working with a printing method and you need to merge it down into not all of these layers, like try to get it to be just the colors, sort of like I showed in the previous video about using the index mode to just target in directly to those colors. See, they're based on that blending model, so, or that color model blending mode, so that really it's not exactly the tones in the original image. It's the blending of a pure orange and red and yellow tint, shade, and tone in this 12 hue times 4 tones version. It's how those would blend together to recreate the original image. So if I'm looking at this with the orange shade, the orange mid-tone, you know, let's kind of look at it like this. Like we've got an orange shade and a red shade. Are they kind of the same thing really? And they're just trying to make what is between orange and red. So if orange is 30 degrees and red is 0 degrees, then it's really 15 degrees. Sometimes you can merge these together. It's really easy. I'll just drag this layer up in between the color fill and the layer here. And because it's set to linear burn, it's blending with the other one, but I don't want the color on it. So I really want these two layers to blend together and then apply the color fill, but make the color fill to 15 degrees. So now I've got that red-orange shade, right? Now let's say I've got the tint and the mid-tone. Are these kind of blending the same thing together? How much of this is maybe the mid-tone and the orange chroma being one type of inner mid-tone? Let's say we merge that together. We'll take off the color fills, see how it blends together, right? And then instead of being pure orange, see that's too much now. What's in between the orange and the mid-tone is kind of like an inner mid-tone right there. Okay, and then let's say we've got the tint and maybe that yellow tint mixed together. There is some yellow here in the turn signal light, but if we wanted to ignore that and we're just trying to merge this into the other one, like if you see what I was showing before, there's just little bits of this tint. You could totally just grab this group, duplicate it, just lasso around those and have a separate layer and just merge this into the other one and still keep the turn signal light. But just for this video, I'm showing maybe how to merge this together. So let's just drag this into there, turn off that fill layer, and now we've got the two merged. If I turn that off, you can see what I mean. And if I wanted to merge it destructively, I could just select those and do Control E. So now there's one layer with the orange tint on it. This one is really the orange or inner mid-tone, or I mean, you could just call it what you visually see. Maybe it's like a brown, light brown type of color. Light brown. This one, we would just call it khaki. And you could repeat those onto these other layers. Let's look at the light brown. And here I'll shift select these and Control E to merge together. So you can see that color separation or color mask. I also like to call these chromaticity masks. Okay. And this one's like the brown. Or the dark brown as opposed to the light brown. And I'm just pasting those names in here. Now in the grayscale section, I'm going to turn all of these layers back on. There's a few things that are sort of extraneous. We don't need these curves and levels already preset. I'll just delete those out. And really this whole group, I can ungroup this group and look at it as just the white. And I'll kind of rename that so you can see it a little better. That's white. This one is light gray. These are just the technical names of them. We've got medium gray. So you see HCWBTSGM tritone medium gray fill. That's really while the actions are running. All that stuff is to keep track of it when I'm creating it in the action. And the smart actions look at those names when they run. So I can't really change the names in the actions just yet. Something I could work on for some future updates. And this is just the black. So you can see it blending together all of the aspects of the original. It still keeps most of it. You know, I've merged things down, so it's a little different now, right? I could go ahead and try to darken some of that back up. I could go to this dark brown, but having all that in there, I'm going to filter it again by mode, screen, and now you can see I've just got those layers. And I can essentially change those colors around however I want. You can see that the black is that area. It's separate from a dark gray now. Most of this stuff was dark gray in the bumper here. The dark gray, so I can lighten it, darken it, make it to a color if I want. And essentially if you want to do the separations, you don't have to recolor them that way. You can just be looking at these groups, and like I showed, you can take any of those out separately and view them. Okay, so I can turn these off and be just looking at the black. Here's the dark gray, has the color fill on it. But it's basically, they're all grayscale extractions with a color fill over them to colorize them. That's why it's called the Colorizer. And we've got the light gray, so you can see the stuff that's light gray in there, right? And based on whatever's like a pure black or really dark is the element of that that takes on the color, right? Okay. So this example, I was able to go ahead and merge things down. But what I have in the, there's one that does just midtones, and that's kind of useful in some other methods. There's actually a really interesting image I've got here. I'll just go off on this for just a second and go into a little tangent. Maybe it's in the other folder here. This French Bulldog image. I found this to be pretty cool the other day when I ran, and let me look at the original size in inches. That's not too bad. I'm just going to shrink it down for the video. And I can have this run in 16-bit if I want. It'll make things a little bit cleaner in certain ways, but I'll just go ahead and show you Smart Colorizer 6 midtones. Or I'm sorry, 12 midtones. The reason I would do that is most of this is orange. It's a mixture of red and yellow. So it would be two different layers mixed together. But if I do the orange one, if it was 6 hues, it'd be like red and yellow mixed together to make that. If I do the 12 hues one, it'll mostly just be orange tones. A little bit of red up in the ear here. But let's just go ahead and run 12 midtones Smart Colorizer on this. And when I, this is the thing, I'm going to get into a lot of different examples in future videos now showing all these products. The flagship product, the Master Colorizer action set, has things that auto merge. So 6 hues plus tints, 6 hues plus shades, plus midtones, those are merging out all the other colors. So kind of what I've been doing in this video of merging things together, those automatically merge, or they have pre-merged actions in them. They also go into additional levels of tones and shades and tints. But just running this one, I found it to be pretty fascinating. That's the fun part for me, is looking at images and seeing it in just a whole different way. I've been using Photoshop for probably more than 20 years, even since I was a kid, playing around with Photoshop version 4, maybe even further back. And I started using it in college, graphic design school for a few years. It was around Adobe like 10, I think it was, when they started calling it CS. And you know, nothing that they taught in college quite got into this level of extracting colors or looking at those color models like HSB and what you could do with that. None of the stuff I really learned in screen printing kind of got that in depth into doing color separations on this level that you really could automate it to a point that gives you a set of ingredients. It's sort of like a food slicer and dicer. It takes the image apart into those preset ingredients and lets you do a lot of things with them. Now you can see with the 12 hues, it's got, you know, 12 hues times 4 tones. That's like 140 something or more layers. Or I'm sorry, that's actually just 48 layers with that. But 48 is still a lot to go through, especially if there's a bunch of colors. Like this image doesn't have anything outside of that range of red, orange, and yellow tones. There might be a little bit of blue-gray stuff in the background. So you can split things automatically, but then there's a lot of stuff you just don't need. So the Smart Colorizer actions eliminate that. It goes through based on that threshold I showed. So, and the threshold is really if there's things that are below a certain level and you just don't want to work with them in the adjustment, they're still going to be there. Like in that other image I will go back to that one and you'll see that, but anyway, so this one, it's pretty cool. You'll notice that it's eliminated it down. If I go to filter by mode and screen, you can see it's really just eliminated it into just these colors. And what I found fascinating was this orange midtone making everything else up. So this 6 midtones or 12 midtones gets rid of all of the hue, tint, and shade, and it really just makes the image out of tones only. So everything else has been merged in, and it still looks like the same image. But now this can just be changed. You know, this almost looks just photorealistic right there. In his fur, it just turned him into, you know, a black colored dog rather than having the fur color. And I can even just change it to anything I want. It still looks photorealistic. Everything's blending together pretty accurately. This control is a lot easier to me than any of the other ways you would use default tools in Photoshop to do this. So I just wanted to show that one as a pretty interesting result that you get from the midtones only. And again, this is the free set. So I really want people to get into this and understand they can play around with it. It doesn't cost anything. Just get into it and have fun with images in any way you want. So you can see what are just the pure dark black areas of the image as opposed to the dark gray, medium gray, light gray. And here's the dark gray. You can see I'm just changing it to a color so you can see exactly the part of the image that it is, and it blends with all the colors around it. Medium gray, that's all that stuff. And so, you know, to me there really is just nothing else out there in Photoshop actions or panels, even paid products, that gets to this level of control, color control of the original image. Sometimes with the white it is pretty interesting. If you change it to some colors, it doesn't quite look photorealistic. But if you go to certain lighter colors, it's almost like the color of the light in the room is now being changed to that. And this is really different than changing the white balance of the image. White balance of the image would change everything else as well. Okay. I like to do certain stuff. And remember I told you there's a little bit of red in that ear. Some of it mixed in a little bit to the fur colors. Now I like to do stuff that is sort of psychedelic, so I'm going to maybe change this. Some of my favorite blends are like this. Make this a little bit of orange. And the fur color I'm going to change like so. Maybe the gray the white. In fact, I might change that to a cyan type of tone. Make the light gray be the yellow. And we still got some of this. Put that to some purple as well. Okay, anyway, that's just some fun ways to colorize an image that is different than using a gradient map. Gradient map wouldn't give you the difference in chroma between the different colors. It would sort of grayscale everything, then do a gradient map. Anyway, back to this other image, so we can just close these. And again, I don't even care for saving some of this stuff, even though that's pretty cool. I know I can do it again very easily just because this is all automated. So I'll close that. Now looking at this image, there was a layer behind everything that I turned off, and that was the merged layer. So this is all that stuff that was sort of parts of the noise of the image, or things that fell below that threshold and were merged out. And sometimes having them in there still, let me just go ahead and put that down to the bottom. So having it in there still is gonna reproduce everything a little more accurately, but you can still take it out and see what you get merging these colors together. So like I was saying, I might make this a little bit darker, back to a little bit more red. This light brown color, it can really be anything I want at this point. But if I was doing something like that other video where I was color separating it, I would try to match the original as close as possible, but merging down to just a few colors. And you could still automatically put this through some of those halftone extraction things by tricking the colors around. So I could take this color, make it the blue, and this other one, make it to an azure blue. This one I would turn to a cyan. And I could even do stuff with the dark gray, medium gray. If I want this to come out in the automatic gray separation, I might push these up a little bit. I might make this a little bit lighter and make the dark gray to a medium gray. And then in another video I showed how I've got a script that'll run from this image. I think I've got it loaded. 12 hues, interlock layers with 1 gray. This script will go ahead and separate that stuff out. I could convert those halftones back. So this would be different than the index tricking method. And that's where it gets into a little bit of screen printing related stuff. But those scripts I've shown in a previous video, part of the Max Chroma Color Blender and Halftone Tessellation, where you can automatically convert any image into the halftones of these type of blends. But that one only goes to 12 hues plus black, white, and gray. And it doesn't automatically eliminate the empty ones, but I'll see that they're empty after it's done running. Okay, so that's finished. I can go ahead and just get rid of certain things like the yellow, lime, green, mint, magenta, rose, orange. Just get rid of that stuff. So you see I've got the blue, azure, and cyan. Let's just double click the color overlay. Turn this to that shaded red. The azure blue will turn into that brown, sort of mid-tone brown. And this cyan into that orange tint. And then, like I said, now the medium gray is going to actually be dark gray. I just wanted more of it to be in the halftones. The halftones are kind of big, but that's because this was a small image to begin with. I believe it was only about 7 inches wide there. The halftone was at 65 lines per inch. All right, and you can see that recreating the original. I would go ahead up to a new layer, make a new layer, and merge them all together. Control-Alt-Shift-E merges all those together. That would be a pretty good print, really. And it's just automatic. Just take these separations right here. You can just turn the color overlay. Let me put the background to white, and just turn the overlay to black. And that's something you could print out and put onto a screen. Anyway, let's just go on with one more example like that other car. Kind of teaches a little bit more about tints and shades. When I saw that, I liked it. And let's just look at the image size real quick. So I'm just showing you the workflow that I go through with this. I'll keep that the way it is, maybe keep it in 8-bit. And I'm just going to run the Smart Colorizer 6 hues this time because it's really just red. I'll let the other things be, there'll be some yellow and red to make that orange here. There'll be a little bit of yellow and red to make that. But let's just go ahead and run. It keeps the transparent background. Let's do 6 hues times 4 tones. So it'll have the tint, shade, and mid-tone. I will show in another video that I've got the 6 hues as a smart object file that you could just open and replace the image with whatever your image is and save it. It'll update all the smart objects. But I went ahead and experimented with making one that's like 6 hues times 4 tones. To do all that as smart objects, it starts to become like it's too slow working with the file. There's way too many layers to create each separation itself as a smart object group. It's still fun to experiment and see what you can get, but none of this stuff really compares to some of the things I have available that I'll show in some other videos where I get into processing and working directly with some code within this program called processing. And I'm going to show it in other videos where I talk about and teach how all of this color separation stuff led me to understand just doing pixel processing on an image using the mathematics of those color groups and how to just write in code and extract things. And then when you do stuff in code, it's sort of instantaneous or just runs on the GPU. This is going to take a second to get back to finishing. Okay, that's all done. And I'm going to go to filter mode, screen, and you can see we've got yellow tint, yellow midtone, red shade, red midtone, and red tint. You can really see that nothing in this, and that's why I wanted to use this example, nothing in this is really the pure red. It's mixtures of a red tint. So you see the tints. If I make that pure red, you know, it's like a little too bright compared to the original. Red shade would be this stuff down here, right? And the midtone is going to kind of be in between the two, a little bit of mixed into both of them, right? And we got the yellow tint and stuff. And then again, we also have control over the dark gray, different from stuff that's just pure black. Not a lot in here that's just absolutely black. Sometimes I will, you know, just when I'm zoomed out, go to them quickly to see what is there. Oh yeah, the black is actually in the transparency down here being just a drop shadow. It's really like a pure black, but it's transparent. So that stuff is different than being, it's not really a light gray or dark gray. It's just a black with transparency. So you have control over that drop shadow separately and the stuff that's like into the darker shades. And light gray. Cool, huh? So anyway, I think I'm gonna finish this video up where it is. We can look at these extractions on their own. You know, maybe I'll just duplicate it up to the top. See, that's the light gray. Here is, I'll turn off this whole gray group actually. It's a little easier to do that. And then look at just the tint, the shade. You can see the mid-tone sort of mixed into both of those. And that's where when you try to start merging these things in, if you don't understand the color model, I guess to the way that I know it, because I know that stuff so well, I know where to merge these in to make them work. That's what's in the, yeah, I have the one that's just midtones, but not the pre-merge. So in the master colorizer action set, that has some pre-merged things, and maybe I'll just show that real quick on this example. I'll open up that action file right here, the master colorizer. And that would be the Smart Colorizer times 3 tones. That is actually going to be just the chroma and the tints and shades and no midtone. So let's just go ahead and remember the chroma really wasn't that bright in there. It kind of got merged out. So let's run the Smart Colorizer 6 hues times 3 tones on this image. And we'll see that the midtone is already merged into the other areas it needs to be. It's going to be part of it in the gray and part of it into the chroma. So a midtone is usually made out of, when you have tints and shades in the image, midtone is made out of the chroma and the gray mixed together. And then after this is done, I'll finish the video. I just like to get into these things, see what you get, go into the different color layers, and you know, it's just fun for me because this is a whole other way to look at the colors in an image and how you have control over them when you divide it like that. And the Smart Colorizer is the part that's fun. Like, I wrote it all out so it goes through and looks at things based on that threshold. The fun part for me is opening up all these examples and seeing what you get. It's like putting it through a food slicer and here's the ingredients. And then, you know, you can do whatever you want with it from that point. But, you know, my videos, they get kind of long. I understand that. That's just part of my nature. I'm trying to make some other quick tip tutorial videos that don't get too crazy. And, you know, I'll start doing just one example at a time sort of videos, not getting into teaching so much, but just showing what you get and doing some fun colorizing. Stuff that goes into screen printing is a very specific process, like a specific workflow. The way I do it is honestly going to be different from the way a lot of other people approach it. So I can't really go and say that it's the best way or something that's going to work in every situation or every you know, workflow, productivity type of environment. To me, this stuff is more of a precision thing, not just about efficiency. But the automations can give you things that you might be able to do faster than going through by hand and manually extracting all of the colors. Like, I have those actions that do the color range to a little bit better of a degree of control. But that stuff might take a lot longer when you go through by hand than one of these methods. And merging down a little bit, it might actually just be good enough to work as is. Convert it to halftones, take it to press and print it. You know, sometimes in those situations, if it's good enough, it's really just part of a day's work. You just print the order and you know, get it out the door and move on to the next one. But for me, this stuff is just at a really deep level of understanding to know how to use this quickly for those kind of workflows. But I'll show it. I'll show some of the art that I have to print here in my own studio and how I might use some of these programs to work with it. But this one with the 6 hues times 3 tones, that is inside the Master Colorizer action set. And that's available for $50 on the payhip.com/Max Chroma webpage. I might put another discount on this. I had a discount before when I had it set to about $100. It included a lot of other stuff, but that stuff is really free now, all part of the free products collection. And I might go ahead and put another social discount on this. I'm not sure yet on that. You know, it's something where I guess if you share it to Facebook or share it wherever, it would let you get a certain percentage off. But right now it's just 50 flat out. Okay, that's done running. Let's go to the mode and screen. Now you see we just got the tint and the shade. So independent control over that, like so. And I'll undo. And we can, so what it does is it merges the midtone into the gray, into the hue itself. And you can see there is a layer down here that's going to have some of that in there, right? The red chroma has been moved and merged down because it didn't pass the threshold, but it's still there. It's still required to make the image look like the original. Sometimes with this, I can take it and just, you know, maybe put a hue saturation on it, desaturate it so it's just gray, and group that together. And then I'll just mix it in to both the red tint, make it linear burn, and also put it into the red shade. And that kind of mixes in. Even though it's supposed to be a brighter red chroma, I can go ahead to this and just make that a little brighter red. Okay, but this is all obviously using knowledge that I've got, which isn't just secondhand to people approaching things from this level, but you know, that's just the way that I would work with these kind of images. So maybe merge that together, make that a little bit brighter. You know, you can do whatever you want with it, but printing this itself, if I want to use that action again to make this like a shade and a tint separation, I guess I'll just make it, it'll make it colors that are going to blend. So this would be a bright blue. They're going to come out in that, I'll just do one that's like a 6 hues. So bright blue and cyan. And then we'll just duplicate. I really don't have to duplicate. It's going to do that automatically with the script. I'll go to Scripts, Browse. It's right here in this folder, Max Chroma Color Blender, or wherever you download that stuff that's in the scripts. Those things are located in the Max Chroma Color Blender and Halftone Tessellator, or within the free products collection. There's a scripts folder, and I'm going to go to 6 hues. Interlock layers, +1 gray. I'll do 60, 65 LPI. Double click this. It's going to go through and convert this into halftones of those colors. And again, the halftones interlock with each other. That's something I discovered you could do that blends colors together a little bit better. It's almost like when you have stippling or other types of artistic blending of halftones. It's the way you would do it if the halftones were very large. So when you're also printing something with them very small, you want them to interlock together. It'll give you the best blend on press. Give or take certain other variables, really depends. Okay, so that's been converted. Now I can go to, you know, don't need, let's say, the magenta, the green, the red. I'll just take this blue and make that my shaded red, right? And this cyan becomes my tinted red. Okay, and then we're over a gray shirt color. And if you're on a gray shirt color, honestly, you don't need the gray in there. If I take that out, it's sort of been underbased by white, but you could just control select those dots and delete them from the underbase layer. I would make sure that my background is black and just do control backspace. And then I don't even need the medium gray. So let's say I'm going on a gray shirt with this, and I'll ignore the yellow for now. So we've got gray shirt, and again, that border, you can just ignore it. I'll come in by -1.5 relative. And we've got this made out of, so an underbase white, black. This is going to be dark red, light red, highlight white, and black. And there we go. And you can see how the transparency was taken into account to be created with just black halftones. If I change the shirt color at this point, I've merged the gray out though, so stuff's going to take on that green color if it's a green shirt color. But if it's just gray, you can really have a good blending of things with the gray without having the white and black sort of blending into each other. You see it's just white halftones, black halftones, and shirt color right there. And then I want to go up to a new layer, Control-Alt-Shift-E. Gives me a much better preview. When you're zooming in and out in Photoshop, it's basically not going to look as good as when you just merge all those layers together. That's a more accurate preview of what you get when you print it. Give or take other variables like the dots gaining or shifting. That stuff is a whole other discussion for another video. But sometimes I'll even take this and just blur it a little bit so like they blend together. And so you can see that image created through a whole bunch of automatic steps, except for me just kind of tricking it so it runs in the halftones. But I could have gone to this before I converted it to blues and just take those out separately and convert them to halftones by themselves. You know, you could just take this blue as a layer right here. Take off the linear burn, just do normal. And I also want to keep the transparency mask, so I'll just hold Alt and drag the transparency mask onto that. Maybe put a white color behind it. Right there. And this is something that I could go and convert. Maybe I'll duplicate the document, flatten the image, show you the manual way. I want to go up to a higher resolution, like 1200. And after that runs, I can convert this to halftones. Looking at the channels, I can really just click one of the channels. It puts it into grayscale mode. Sometimes when you're in RGB, you think you have to go to image mode grayscale before you can do bitmap. But all you have to do is click on it. If everything's neutral, just click on one of those red channels, image mode, bitmap. Yep, 1200, halftone screen, 65, 22.5. And there is the manual halftone conversion of one of those. So, you know, lots of different uses for this stuff. You can just colorize it, make adjustments to the original image. But I wanted to show some of the differences between the free HCWBTSGM Colorizer action set and what is part of the stuff that's in the paid Master Colorizer action set that includes some of those pre-merged actions. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.